Welcome to the By Blacks channel. I'm Camille Dundas, editor-in-chief. You know, the funny thing about all these awakenings that have been happening in the midst of the global Black Lives Matter protests is that white people aren't the only ones who have woken up to racism. Black people are going through an awakening too. That's how insidious racism is, that for years we've internalized its demons, lived with them, made space for them, and totally dismissed the fact that they were even living with us. Until now. It seems like the Band-Aid has been ripped off, and Black people everywhere are unsilencing. And nowhere has that been more apparent than in the media industry. So, as you can see, joining me here today are 5 people whose names you'll all be familiar with by now because they have all spoken up loudly and unapologetically about their experience as Black media professionals. Joshua Grant, a social media and digital marketing manager, Kathleen Newman-Bremang, senior writer at Refinery 29, Kayla Grey, anchor on TSN SportsCenter, Ika Wong, TV and YouTube personality, and Adrian Harewood, host of CBC Ottawa News. Thank you all for being here with me today.
Thanks for having us.
So, what I want to ask you all first is what's changed, and why do you think so many Black media professionals are speaking out now? Adrian, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's power in numbers, and I think that people have lost their fear. I think it also helps that people, when they have spoken, they've spoken very strongly, and they've spoken very honestly, and they've spoken in a way that has inspired people to speak up themselves. Sometimes when we take risks, and other people know that we are jeopardizing potentially something that's very meaningful to us, it makes them perhaps sit back and say, hey, maybe I can also speak up and maybe I can also take that chance. So I think that there has been momentum created by the interventions that people have made, critical interventions that people have made. And I think that it has resulted in this kind of a parade of people speaking up and speaking out.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I think Adrian's right. I think, honestly, it was at the point when I think people realized that they wouldn't get fired because it would look really bad on these brands or these companies to fire us if we spoke out in this moment. I mean, for me, it was seeing everyone else speak up first. And like Adrian said, there was power in numbers. You know, Tyrone Edwards, who is a host on eTalk, had a really powerful moment on the social, and he said he was unmuting himself, and it was something clicked for me there because I was like, I have been muting myself about some of the experiences that I've had in media, and then it was the like Black Square Day. Mm-hmm. What was that called again?
Blackout Tuesday.
Blackout Tuesday. There we go. Blackout Tuesday. And then it became, this pressure thing where it was like, if you are not talking about anti-Black racism right now, you're getting shamed. And so then I was like, oh, now's the time. Like, you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. So I think for me, it was like the power numbers, the fact that it became a thing where it felt, as much as it was still really scary, it felt like we had a little bit of immunity because of the reckoning that was happening.
Mm-hmm. Josh?
For me personally, I was triggered by my former employer trying to take part in this Black Square Day and saying that they stand with Black people in the past, present, and in the future. And I think it was the day after I had attended a march here in Toronto. I guess that would have been like May 30th. For George Floyd and Regis. And I was just feeling very fired up and inspired by everyone else who came out to the march, Black people, allies as well. I had never been part of something like that before. So seeing my former employer trying to enter this conversation when they had no right to join that convo, I felt like I needed to say something. So I'd say that was the main contributing factor.
Kayla?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. There was a sense of immunity. There was a sense that you might not get fired. I think for me, though, it was like, okay, so if I lose my job, I lose my job. My brothers and sisters right now are losing their lives. And so why not speak? And for me, I think there's been a lot of unconditioning through this, and reworking and retooling and re-looking at myself. And for me, speaking out was me grabbing back my power and standing in my power and being like, nah, I'm good at what I do. I do this. Because for so long, Black people in media have been jumping through hoops to get what our white counterparts have been handed. We don't get the same investment in who we are. And so for me, speaking out was like, I'm gonna let y'all do that. You can play the black square game all you want, but if we're gonna come out with it, let's come out with it. Let's talk about it. And this was just, I think, a way for a lot of us to be like, we're done playing this game. We're done playing this game.
Ika?
For me, it was before that, and it's weird because I keep hearing people say like, I knew I wouldn't lose my job. Where for me, I'm like, I know I probably won't work in the industry ever again if I do this. So it was a little different. I was going through this, but I thought it was a bit unique to my experience because I didn't come from a journalistic background. So I thought the way I was being treated was because of that. And then Josh and I actually worked for the same company, and I saw that he'd spoken out, and he was one of the first people I actually spoke out. And I remember thinking, I remember actually sitting, I'm like, oh man, I wish more people could speak out on their experience. And I'm like, oh crap, that person is me.
Yeah.
So I decided to speak out because I didn't want to feel that way anymore, and I didn't want other people to feel that way. I never knew that so many people were already feeling that way.
Yeah, it just feels, Camille, like the rest of the world, the rest of our newsroom got an invite to our group chat. Like for years and years and years, we've had Black group texts, we've had Black DMs, Black private messages. There has been a whisper network about some of our colleagues. I worked for the same company that Ika and Josh had worked for, and I left my first job because of racism and fear that I wouldn't be allowed back in the industry. And so those are things that you pass on to your peers. And it just felt like this reckoning was just an invitation to everybody's group chat messages.
Kathleen, you wrote a pretty explosive article, I'll describe it as, outlining, your experience as a producer at Much Music and at The Social. It was called, and please Google it if you haven't read it yet, For Black Women in Media, A Dream Job is a Myth. And, for me, it was really interesting to watch how you got to the point of writing that article. Because a few weeks, I think it was maybe the week or 2 weeks before, I remember watching you as a guest on The Social, where all the other hosts except Marcy gave up their chairs to make room for Black voices. And, I'm watching it, and maybe it's just because I know you, but I could tell how uncomfortable you were. And it's almost like you were seething on the inside, like you had so much to say. There was so much emotion, but you weren't being given the time to let it out. Can you talk a bit about what was going on for you in that moment, that clip that has now gone semi-viral?
Yeah, I mean, I think you picked up on that because you know me, Camille, but I also think that if you were watching me, so what had happened was I was watching the panel before me. So the previous panel included Kayla and Tyrone, two of my best friends. And Tyrone had, like I said, had this moment on this show the week prior.
Right.
Where he had cried.
Yes.
And it was really powerful. And then Kayla, the segment before me, had also, given this really beautiful speech, and she got emotional. And I could tell both of those moments were going to give the show, viral social media moments, because people were going to resonate, or they were going to resonate with people. And so I knew going in that I was like, okay, this whole share your chair thing, it's great in spirit, but I knew what was going on behind the scenes. And so then I watched those two moments and I was like, you don't get our tears and our trauma without having someone speak out about what's happening and what's not happening behind the scenes, which is there's no Black voices behind the scenes. And then I got the 1 minute count. So we were talking about other stuff, and then I got the 1 minute count, and it was one of the executive producers who I mentioned in the piece in my ear. And I was just like, something just snapped at me, and I was like, I gotta say something. And then, as I say in the piece, I didn't even really get to say that much on the show. All I got to get out was that there weren't any Black voices behind the scenes. But I had so many other things to say. And, Ika mentioned, she knew she was going to lose her job or not work in the industry again. And as much as it did feel like there was a little bit of safety because of the numbers or because of the reckoning, and it would look really bad on companies to fire people or not work with people, I also knew that, I may never work with Bell Media again if I do this. I'll probably never work with The Social again if I do this. But like Kayla said, it was like, I can't be about it and not be about it. This is bigger than me at this point. This is about the next producer who comes into The Social. This is about creating a safer environment for the next generation. And so that's what was going through my head. And honestly, that was going through my head, which is why I don't even know if I was that articulate in the moment.
Yeah, well, and for anyone who didn't see it, Kayla towards the end basically said, "Hey, this is great that you guys are doing this, but guess what? You don't have any Black producers, and so let's talk about that." That was paraphrasing her snap moment. Adrian, I want to talk to you also about snapping, because you're the host of a nightly news show. You're on that desk every night. And I'm curious if you've ever felt like you were going to snap at any point, or if you've handled it differently, because what I've noticed with you is that you actually started several years ago. You started using social media, Twitter specifically, to more consistently call out things, especially with the CBC, where you are still employed. So how have you, vis-a-vis what Kathleen just described, how have you been handling those conflicts, while you're still on air and calling out things that you see are wrong?
Yeah, well, I think that, I came to media because I was an activist. Right, when I was in university, the apartheid was still in effect, and the early 1990s was a time of kind of rising Black consciousness, and for us, media was about making change. Media was about changing the world. Media was a site of struggle, and so our entry into media was about using it as an instrument to raise consciousness, to challenge power, and to kind of ruffle feathers. That's why we entered. And I think that I don't know. I'm old. All of you folks are young people, right? I'm an old man. I'm turning 50 this year, so I'm an old guy. I'm the old guy.
Not old.
That ain't old.
Stop.
I'm the old guy. But I hope that I've remained true to that, right?
Yeah.
I was part of a cohort of people, and that's what we were doing. So being part of media, the goal was never to be on television necessarily, right? The goal wasn't even a career. And again, that's not to take anything away from people for whom this was something that they always aspired to do. For us, it was about our humanity, right? It was about trying to preserve, trying to ensure that we took our space, our rightful space, in every single institution in this country, and did not back down. So I think that operating in that kind of spirit, I think I feel often, I feel strong because I know I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of strong people who've come before me and who've actually sacrificed a lot more, right? And I feel strong because I know that there have been other people in media, different moments, who have also spoken up. And so I know I'm not alone, right? And I know that we are, all of us, we're part of a tradition, right? We come from families. We're many of us here are from the Caribbean. We might have roots in the Caribbean. right? Our presence in the Americas is as a result of a kidnapping. Right? Our humanity was stolen from us, right? We spent the last 400 years trying to impose ourselves and to give voice to our own story. So we're all of us here, we're all part of a tradition. We're all part of a long, long struggle.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit though about. It's interesting that you talk about coming into this as an activist, but there's still a part that all of us kind of hide, and a silence that we carry. And I remember responding to your tweet because, so just to give you guys context, my first real job in journalism was working on Adrian's show at the CBC in Ottawa. I was a producer writing on his show, and I looked up to him so much because he was this amazing Black man that was heading up this show that I hadn't seen another Black man do. And I felt like everyone has big respect for him. His life is perfect. His career is amazing. 15 years later, to see you tweeting about microaggressions that you were experiencing at the time that I was there, experiencing the exact same microaggressions, but you and I never spoke about it because it never occurred to me to even ask you if this was happening to you. Because number one, I assumed it was just happening to me because I never spoke to anyone else about it. Number two, I assumed I deserved it. Three, I just assumed that it was part of what I had to go through. But I'm talking about that silence that all of us till now, I feel like we're carrying. Were you aware that you were carrying that, or now as you look back, like?
Well, the story is basically that one of my colleagues, I think it was my first or second week hosting that show. So it's the drive home show, the CBC drive home show on radio in Ottawa. And I was coming back home. I was coming back from Toronto, and I was coming home to host the show. And I think it was the first or second week. One of my colleagues, who was a very respected person in the newsroom, very respected in the community, basically said that I was a token hire. And he said, and first, I shouldn't say he, but I just outed. I just said he. The person, anyway, the person said it to my face. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't know how to handle it. I think I was mortified. I was sad. I was angry. And at the moment, and I regret this, I was a bit paralyzed because, you're entering a new space. You're trying not to be difficult, right? You're trying to get along with your community, this new community that you're a part of. He has colleagues that are allies. So I was in a bit of a weird position. So I in hindsight, I wish I'd said something in that moment.
So many of us have those moments, right? Where things happen and you're like, I should have said something. Yeah.
But what I did, and not to take up too much time, was I think I overcompensated. What I ended up doing was I tried to demonstrate to everybody in the city that I would do everything. So I could do sports, I could do history, I could do philosophy, I could do literature. I became the busiest person in Ottawa as a result. I did every single event at the Ottawa Writers Festival and tried to interview all the biggest people to demonstrate that I had range and that I couldn't be boxed in, and that I was trying to prove my bona fides. And now I realize that was a burden, and I wish I hadn't felt I needed to perform in that kind of way, but that was the truth. That's what I did.
I'm going to take a moment for that burden, because damn, have we all not felt that. Joshua, your story became the catalyst for a full third-party investigation at Chorus Entertainment, where you worked as a social media strategist. You released a video that outlined some pretty terrible editorial choices, directions, I'd say, that you were given. Can you tell us a bit about that, and how have you handled everything that's happened since then for anyone who's could potentially end up in a situation where they're a whistleblower, let's say, as you were? How have you handled it? What advice do you have for outing a company like that?
Okay. So just really quick, just in case anyone who's watching isn't familiar, I'll just give the Coles notes of what happened. Like, I was hired to work at Chorus as a social media strategist. I worked there for 2 years. And it should have been like the most exciting time, based on the brands that I was getting the opportunity to work with, and based on, the audience feedback that I get regularly. Like from the outside, it looked like I was doing such a great job. But on the inside, it was like the better I did, the more I would like get into trouble, or I'd notice that there were certain rules that only applied to me and not my white counterparts. So for instance, I couldn't even say publicly that I ran the social media account for Global TV, although everyone else who ran other brands, they could say that. So there were a bunch of microaggressions and racism that I experienced throughout my time, and it all came to a head in October 2018 when Colin Kaepernick had that Believe in Something Nike ad. And my white boss came to me and said, we should make a meme out of this. And I was just really confused about why we'd be making a joke out of this ad. And also the brands that we worked on, we never touched on anything that had to do with race or anything that could be considered political. So I put out a tweet about that, just kind of delicately calling out my boss for suggesting that we make a meme out of that. And he tried to fire me over that. His boss also tried to fire me over it, even though HR later said that it wasn't a fireable offense. I left there to go to CBC, experienced a lot of the same things, and I won't get into everything, but Chorus basically followed me to CBC and sent some threats, and I ended up with no job and no explanation as to why I was let go. So yeah, May 31st was when Chorus decided to put out their black square, and I just couldn't believe that they decided to enter into the conversation. So I remember I wrote out a thread, and I either texted or called Ika to say that I was doing this. And I put it out, and then I just turned off my phone and went for a walk, like for 3 hours, because I was just so scared. I didn't know anyone in my real life who had spoken out like this before against like a big company, and I didn't know what the result was going to be. But then when I turned on my phone, I saw all the positive feedback from so many strangers across the internet, which was really reassuring. The scary part that came after that was the fact that Chorus didn't respond to me. So now I had all this stuff out there, and no one said anything, no one was addressing anything. So that's when I decided to make my video, and I put that out, and that's where I just outlined everything from start to finish, what happened at Chorus. And then they eventually responded and opened up that investigation. Your second question was, how did you handle
what happened after? Because you've been really open about your mental health and how it's affected your life.
Yeah, I'd say I didn't handle it very well for the first month and a half, to be honest. Like I was constantly checking social media to see what people were saying, because also I was concerned that people were going to try and discredit my story or say that, I'm pulling the race card, that kind of stuff. And there were people who said that, and it did hurt me in the beginning, but now I'm just better at tuning that stuff out. I stayed in touch with all my friends and my family and talked to them throughout all this stuff. And also I have a therapist who I've been seeing regularly, and that was good support for sure.
Good. It's really risky. And, speaking of risks, Ika, you pretty much risked it all when you resigned from your role on ET Canada because of their refusal to make a public statement in support of anti-Black racism, among other things. I wonder if you could talk a bit about what your thought process was before you hit send on that email to the executive producer. What were you going through? And do you feel like anything is changing for real now?
So before I hit send, I wanted to make sure that the email wasn't attacking. And I made sure to not use words like you, I made sure I used ET Canada, so that they would understand the culture and not make it like a personal issue. Okay. So I wrote this email, and I wanted to outline how it feels for me as being one of the only Black faces I saw at ET Canada when I was there, how it felt for me to actually be there, how it felt for me to be gaslit, and how it felt for me, to not feel like they support Black lives. So before I hit send, I didn't see a problem with the email. She actually wanted a phone call, and I was like, because I don't want you controlling the narrative. Yeah, I want it to be in an email, and I wasn't planning on going public with it. I just wanted there to be an email so that if somebody asked or like what happened, what was going on, I didn't want it to be in her words. I wanted there to be something that she could show. So I wasn't really nervous about like sending the email. I thought it was like very well written. I thought it was very, I thought it was really like thought provoking, and I thought they would appreciate it, to be honest. Yeah, they didn't appreciate it.
Not at all. But they've since apologized to you, etc. But there was a lot more. The way the story came out, it was as if you were just responding to their lack of response. But there was a lot more going on building up for you, including them cutting your pay by 50% with no real explanation, and several other things, right? And, I was saying to the group right before we went live that when I was watching your video, you were being so raw and honest. And I felt like it took someone, you mentioned off the top that you didn't come from a journalistic background into the media. And I almost feel like it took someone who didn't carry the weight of that like journalism background to really tell the truth about what we experience in the media. You talked about, you pulled the curtain on pay, because everyone thinks we make a shitload of money because it's like a really glamorous job. You're on TV interviewing celebrities, and you don't. Everyone thinks you have this big wardrobe budget. Meanwhile, you're getting paid $360 a day, and you have to come out of pocket for your hair and wardrobe, which for any one of us could also be $360 a day. So I wonder if you would talk about how you came to that place of honesty in just laying all of that bare. It's really hard for all of us to do.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. I would definitely say I had to like record that video because I was trying to actually not, because it was embarrassing. Like my public image, not that person, strong. I stand up for myself. Very embarrassing. I accept these things, and I just felt really like, oh, like this is so embarrassing. But I'm willing to embarrass myself so that people are aware of what's going on and they don't fall into that. So it was definitely hard. But
Ika, sorry, can I interrupt you for 1 sec? Because you broke up a little bit. Could you start over again, just so it'll be clear when we do the recording?
Yeah, for sure. I was just saying, for me, it was embarrassing. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna be brave and tell people what's going on. You're right. People do perceive us as this image. They have this image of us, and they do think, especially of me, like people don't think I'm someone who will get walked over. They don't think I'm someone who would even tolerate getting walked on, or tolerate, like not speaking up for myself or for my worth. So speaking about that was definitely hard, because I'm now going to expose to people. And when you're talking, it's not like it's everyone who likes you who's watching this. There are people who are like dying to see you fail, who's like, oh, yes, girl, like you were getting paid nothing. Like, so like, for me, I was like, oh, this is going to suck so bad. But I felt like if I don't do this, then it's going to continue happening. And I didn't want somebody else walking into that situation and feeling like that is supposed to happen. Because again, like at that time, I thought it was more of like an Ika treatment. I didn't really realize that all Black people that even I look up to were getting treated this way. I didn't realize. I thought it was just me, because I thought they thought of me as like reality TV trash or something. So I was like, you know what I mean? And I also thought their ignorance came from just not having any Black people there. Like there is no Black people there, you guys.
Wow. If you're just joining us, we're having a Black in Media roundtable, speaking about our experience as Black professionals working in the media in Canada. Kayla, you've never been one to shy away from voicing your opinion, but you paid a steep price when you called out a former colleague for her use of the N-word in a blog that she wrote. And, it's ridiculous for all of us that in 2020 we're still having to tell white people it's not okay to use the N-word. How tired are you right now? and where do you find the strength to keep speaking up? Because even after that huge backlash, that storm, you didn't hold back. You kept going.
Yeah, I'm exhausted, let's be honest. And
Yeah.
Some days you just wake up and you're like, let me just talk about something else or fight for my joy in some way, shape, or form. But these are the things that we have to do. I think, as Adrian mentioned, like, I'm not where I am if the people that came before me didn't put down the work and lay down the blueprint for me to speak. And so, I think it's important that I acknowledge that. Like, I didn't just come out of nowhere. I exist because of Adrian, because of the Marcy Ians, because of the people before them. And so I think that, to me, is why I keep going, is because it's not about me anymore. It's about who I want to come in and be better than me, to have more opportunities than me, to not go into work looking for a sense of validation as a Black employee. Instead, they step into their workspace looking for affirmation because they damn well should be in the room in the first place.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's why I keep going. I think if anyone has followed me, this is not the first time I've spoken out about things. I've been very vocal for a long ass time. It's the same energy. But also, at this point too, I think I'm so tired of the BS that I just do it more frequently. I used to pick and choose, and now I'm just like, nah, y'all want to talk about racism? Let's talk about it then. Let's go off. But I think my why is the who and the people coming after me, because I just think it's so important. I look at where I'm at. It's too late. It's too late. At this point, we are just, if you're kind of in this industry as a person of color, you are almost kind of dealing with all that conditioning. There's a lot of unconditioning, a lot of dealing with your trauma that has to happen, that goes on. And so I just almost feel like it's so far gone. So the focus now is, how do we create an environment for the next generation to not even have to flinch or worry about them stepping into a workspace as themselves.
I watched you recently on a CBC News panel, and it reminded me, the clip that I saw reminded me of the exact reason that I've turned down, I think it's at least 14 media requests over a 2-week period after the murder of George Floyd. Can you tell the audience a bit more about how Black people are really being played in mainstream media a bit on this topic? Because when you're on that panel, you were on a mainstream media platform, but you were very clear as to what you were there for and what you were not there for. So give the audience some context and talk more about that.
Absolutely. It was the CBC's being Black in Canada, or Black in Canada special. And basically the topic, Josh also was there, was, is it okay for white people to use the N-word? And listen, I know you, Kathleen's a producer. I know producers. I know we could do better than that question as a panel discussion. And to me, it just felt like that discussion was being had to be a distraction from what was going on at the CBC. Obviously, we know what happened with Wendy Mesley. We've known of the second account of someone else using the N-word in the work environment. And so it just felt like a little bit like we were doing too much song and dance, and it was the runaround for the runaround. And I think Black people know this too well. We know the conversations that are set up as distraction to take away from what are we actually going to do. So when I'm being asked to do podcasts or interviews about why white people should or should not use the N-word, the jig is up. The jig is up, because we very well know, I think we all know, is why, you wouldn't read, say, for example, in the article I had something to say about, she wouldn't read the first paragraph in which she dropped the N-word in a room full of Black people. So there you go. And if the argument was, oh, well, we wanted punch, then we need to really reassess the intention of writing the piece in the first place. And so, I just feel like the questions of the first week, as you guys know, I did partake in panels that talked about systemic racism in Canada because we seem to feel as though it doesn't exist up here. But I think I kept it very brief on how long I was talking about that topic for. And the reason why I was intentional about joining conversations like that was because truly, for a period, it seemed as though we thought we were all clear and throwing stones at our neighbors. Now we very well know there's Google. Like, Google is free, as Kathleen says. Like, we know racism exists up here. So what are we going to do? And I feel like when we keep getting pushed back to that conversation that can white people use the N-word, blah, 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 it feels like we are just buying time for people that actually don't want to do any type of real work. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
So when I went on CBC, that's exactly what I said.
For me, it's like,
real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Josh.
No, just because I was on that panel, and I feel like
I
can admit that I did get played. I didn't really know what to expect. I asked ahead of time, like, what it was exactly that we're going to be talking about. They said usage of the N-word, the usage of that, like, will there be like white supremacists who feel like they should be allowed to say the N-word? Because if so, I don't really want to be part of this. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. Just that I got played, and like I just have to be more careful about the things that I accept to be part of.
I don't think you I don't think you got played. To be clear, the reason why I had said yes and I had gotten feedback from other people was Asha, a Black host, was hosting. So this is who we show up for, our Black fellow journalists in media. So most definitely, if anyone Black asks me for anything right here, right now, I'm leaning more to yes than no, because that's just what it is, and that's what our community is all about and has always been about. So I don't think in any way you got played. You showed up for someone who also knows the struggle in your industry. I think where we need to be very clear with producers and people that put us in these situations to keep away from the real conversation is we just need to say, we see you. We see what this is about. We know the jig is up. And so now you're on the clock.
Yeah, for me, it was just like, I declined every single one because I was tired of hearing the question, what can we do? And I said, if I hear that question one more time, I will probably snap on the People's TV. And I'm not trying to snap on the People's TV, so I'm going to decline this media request. Because you know what to do. You know what I'm saying? And
you just don't want to do it.
Also, we've been telling you, like, for years, we've been having these conversations. And so now to go back and say, what do we do? It's like, did I stutter 4 years ago?
Yeah. Speaking of that, Adrian, I wonder if you could give us some perspective, because one of your Twitter threads, you talked about attending a journalism conference 30 years ago. And it's like deja vu for you right now. You're saying the exact issues are still being debated and hashed out. What do you see different happening in this current conversation that you didn't see before? You might be on mute, Adrian.
Oh. He is on mute. I don't know if we can unmute him.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Got you.
Yeah. What's different about this moment? Well, I think that I think there are more of us. I think that's one thing that's different. At the time, this was the Canadian University Press Conference. So that these were campus newspapers, and a lot of the people who were attending that conference today are, pretty well-known figures. People like Doug Saunders and Naomi Klein. Stephanie Nolan was there. Nala Ayed, who's a foreign correspondent who hosts CBC Ideas now. So it's that generation that we're at that gathering. And yeah, we were talking about systemic racism. Systemic racism was something that was being talked about a lot in the early 1990s, and it was being talked a lot in the context of media, because we looked, for example, at the mastheads of all these different newspapers, particularly on university campuses, and most of them were all white. And we knew that that was a problem. And we knew that it was a problem that a lot of the major media organs, whether it be the Globe and Mail or whether it be at the time, CBC or the Toronto Star, like these were spaces that were not as welcoming and did not have the kind of diversity in the newsroom that they should have. So we knew this a long time ago, and that's what we were struggling to change. So the fact that 30 years on, there has been some change in that we are seeing more people in front of the camera, but the problem is that we don't have enough people in decision-making positions.
Yep.
We don't have enough of us who are in positions of being senior producers or being able to kind of determine the direction of programs. We don't have enough people who are the proverbial gatekeepers. Those gatekeepers matter. I'll speak about CBC, and I've said this before. It's inexcusable in 2020 that the entire senior executive of the public broadcaster is white. It's inexcusable that the I think 10 or 11 out of 12 members of the board of directors for CBC are all white. That can't be happening. Right? So we're still having that conversation. That's unacceptable, and it can't be allowed to continue.
And I also argue that they know that it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Like truly, I just feel like they know, like they're just too comfortable. The reason why there's so much resistance, or people are so happy, and actually, frankly, people have thrived because of white supremacy in spaces like ours. So they just want to keep it as is. So they find different ways to give you the runaround. And, as much as I love what I do, throwing people of color on Black people on camera is an easy fix. That's the easiest fix you can do. The hard stuff is who is in the editorial room, who is picking our stories, who, in my particular case, has the power to buy properties to show with our programming. I can tell you it's not Black people, and that's where the real work comes.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to what Kayla is saying, I think that a lot of this speaking out that we're doing and this reckoning is trying to hold a mirror up to this industry to say the people who are in power, fix it. Mm-hmm. And, even specifically with my piece, I didn't name names. But I knew that those people would know who they were. Mm-hmm. And I knew they probably wouldn't get fired. But to go back to what Kayla said, now I'm like, those same people are now saying, we're going to fix it. We're going to be the ones that change this environment. And they're the ones who created it. They're the ones who upheld white supremacy. And now they're going to fix it. I actually don't think they have a vested interest in doing that because they have thrived, because they created it. And they knew, because I personally was telling them, other Black people, elders who came before me, like Adrian, have been telling them. Mm-hmm. So now that they're saying all the right words, they're doing all the workshops, do we really trust that these people are going to fix the industry that they built?
It's interesting. Go ahead, Adrian.
I don't think we can wait for anybody, and I don't think we should expect it to be changed. I think what's required is noise. We need to make a lot of noise, and we need to keep up the pressure. And I keep on repeating that idea of, power only responds to pressure. That's the only way in which change takes place. And what you might also find is that there are people who want you to push. There are actually people who might support you, but who need you to be pushing from the outside because in order for them to gain the courage to push from the inside. Right? What I would say is that I know there are good people within the CBC structure. And there's some good people in those senior executive positions, but they're not necessarily in the majority. And so they need people from the outside. They need people from the community. They need people to be speaking up strongly and saying, this is the direction the organization needs to go in, the industry needs to go in. And that gives them a push as well.
And that's 100% true, because I think we should take a moment to acknowledge and recognize that those of us, like us journalists in positions of relative privilege, having a platform to speak, being on camera, the courage that we got to speak out was from people who don't have the platforms we have. It's because they took to the streets and they created this mass global conversation that we have that courage now that, well, you know what, we won't be fired, let's talk. So I think it's important for us to recognize that, because we're the ones on camera, we're the ones speaking out, but the real credit, the real reason we're able to do that is for people who are unseen.
Yeah.
And the people who were pushed out of this industry because of it. Yeah.
I want to, Kathleen, your point made me think about, we often say that, we didn't create systemic racism, and so it's not Black people's work to dismantle it. But at the same time, we're saying we don't trust the same people to do the work. So I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud, like, what do we do? Who's going to do it? I hear you, Adrian, that, we need to make noise, but, you've been on the inside, let's say, for these number of years. How do you feel? Do you feel like whatever you're doing is going to make an eventual change, or do you feel like you're just going to keep making noise till you can't anymore?
Well, I should have added to that. It's not just noise. We need to get organized. We need to organize ourselves, and we need to continue having these kinds of conversations. One of the great things about what's been happening over the last couple of months is that we've been creating community. We've been creating networks. I now know who Josh is. I now know who Kayla is. Kayla knows who I am. I know Kathleen. I'm reconnecting with you. Like, I'm saying that's what we need to be doing. We need to be getting together. We need to be communicating. We need to be strategizing. We need to be very, very systematic in the way in which we approach things. We have to be intentional. And I think so the change is already happening. I'll give you one other example. For a long time in this country, there's been these kind of two solitudes, even within the Black community, between the Francophone African Canadians and Anglophone African Canadians. And within the CBC, there's been that divide. I think as a result of what's been happening over the last number of months, we're communicating a lot more, with the Francophone Black folks at Radio-Canada. And we're realizing that we have a lot in common and that we can help each other, right? So there's power in that, right? And we need to kind of recognize our power, harness that power, and keep on pushing and keep on organizing. The change is happening.
I want to talk a little bit about consequences, because I'm just curious to know how you all are feeling about this. It got me thinking, as Kathleen, we're talking about dismantling, right? The way that this has been dismantled so far is through what we're now calling cancel culture. And I want to know if you all feel that there is space for an alternative where someone doesn't lose their job, but they have to atone in some other way? Or do you feel like they have to lose their job? And I'll just make it more clear by using an example. Let's take Jess Mulroney as an example. Is there a universe where she didn't lose her job and her gigs and was somehow held accountable? Is there any universe in which that could happen?
Any universe that she got canceled in the first place? I think that's the real cancel. Listen, I hear you, and I think that in my instance, I'm an only in my building, right? And so we can't ask to fire everybody, because that's literally everybody in the sports space, right? But I do think that there are ways, and it's funny because I feel like the conversation around cancel culture has conveniently spiked up when Black people are just asking for some piece of equality. And so it feels like a new distraction conversation.
Yes.
My thing is, when you do wrong, and this goes back to just basics. If I wrong you and I apologize, I acknowledge it and I own it and I apologize, I've done all I needed to do, right? I can do the work to fix myself. But listen, if you feel like you cannot rock with me moving forward, I am not allowed to police how you feel or heal. I'm not allowed. That is ego, and I should have no say. So it's funny because cancel comes up when a group of people that feel hurt decide not to rock with something anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, but true accountability is just owning your mistakes. What happened? If they rock with you after, that's cool. If not, then that should also be cool too, because you have to let go of ego and policing how
Mm-hmm.
people feel and how they heal about things that happen to them. And
So,
so I think it's
mm-hmm.
more when I'm having conversations right now with white people that I work with, or what the biggest question that I ask when it comes to change, because again, like I said, we can't turn over, right? It's this. And I think that this is, to me, the biggest roadblock is, what are you willing to give up?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very scary question for a lot of people who want change to ask. What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up that promotion or give up that seat? Are you willing to give up 5 minutes of your presentation to give space and room for other people to use their voice to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to give up 20 minutes of your hour to mentor the next person coming in? Like, what are you willing to give up? Because the change, if we're all going to keep everyone in place, is going to take something. So we
Absolutely.
have to be okay with something going.
I'm wondering if any of you had the same, Kathleen, reaction, like in terms of, white person does something, corporate company automatically cuts ties, and then that's it. And it feels like, yes, we want that person to lead, to be have consequences, but it almost feels like a performative action, because it's like they don't know what to do with it. And so the easiest thing is just distance themselves, and they never have to talk about it again.
Yeah, I think the apology is the first step, right? Mm-hmm. As Kayla is saying, like, yeah, we can decide not to rock with you anymore, but it's also, then what? I think the only time for me that it is actually, I have actually looked at a white person or a non-Black person who has done something deserving of being pulled up, and then I have either forgiven them or said, okay, you're a real one because you've learned and moved on. Because if we don't think people can change, what are we doing here,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
You have to believe that people can change. The only time that I have actually felt like that was true was when there was work after the apology, mm-hmm. or there was work after the, like, taking the fact that people didn't want to rock with you anymore. So if we're talking about Jessica Mulrooney, what is she going to do in a couple years? If she's apologized multiple times, lots of them were clumsy. She's apologized multiple times. If then in the future she takes steps and actually shows that she has changed and there's action behind her apology, mm-hmm. then we'll have a different conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, in reaction to my piece. I've gotten some private apologies. Mm-hmm. Film media didn't acknowledge my piece publicly. I haven't seen any, public action so far from that. And that's a tough situation to be in.
Mm-hmm. Ika, what are your thoughts on the way that people are being handed out consequences for racist behavior?
So it's really funny. So at ET Canada, I heard that sorry guys, I'm sorry. The kids
No
are like, I just literally threw a hat at them. I'm like,
do what you gotta do, girl. Oh my God.
I'm so sorry. It's funny because they're right, because at ET Canada, I heard that the executive producer that I sent the email to, I heard she got fired. And I was like, okay, but it didn't feel good, because I want there to be change. I want there to be action. I want to see us in better position. And I get that, yeah, okay, she, I guess, paid, for what she did. Well, guess what? She shouldn't have been there in the first place if that's how she handles people. So that doesn't really mean anything. What really means something is actually, like seeing us in better positions, where I feel like, okay, we spoke out and something needed to happen, or something is happening, or change is happening. I would have felt better if they hired 10 Black people, to be honest.
Mm-hmm,
I just really feel like I didn't get any gratifications from that at all. It was just like, okay, now what kind of thing, you took action there. Now what? So I feel the exact same way as everybody else here feels, to be honest. Feels like a little good, like instantly. It's like,
right.
Oh yes, like you hear that song, "You're gonna lose your job."
Yeah, right.
And then like 2 seconds later, it's like, okay, now what?
Now what? Yeah.
How can we win?
That's what I'm getting at. I'm getting at the now what.
I feel like a lot of these companies are breathing a sigh of relief right now because these conversations have died down, not amongst us. These conversations will continue to be happening because we stay Black. We're still going to be talking about this, but it does feel like the pressure, as Adrian said, power responds to pressure. It feels like the pressure has lifted a bit. And so they did their initial firing, like in Ika's case, or they said their apologies either publicly or privately, and now they're like, whew, dodge that bullet. And that's why I love that we're having this conversation. Let's continue to apply that pressure because they don't get to breathe a sigh of relief and then continue on like they have been. Or hire some people at a lower level, like middle to low level, and not fix the management or executive structures of their companies.
Okay, I said I wasn't going to talk about what we should do now or what can we do, but I'm going to throw the audience a bone. If there are any corporates listening in, I'll go around and tell me one thing that you wish they would do today or tomorrow or should have been doing. And if you want to add to that, also, what's one thing you want to pass on to your fellow Black colleagues in media? What do you want them to do going forward? What's one thing we could all be doing, either for ourselves or for this movement? Adrian?
I'm just thinking about that line by Toni Morrison. And I'm paraphrasing. She says that if you're in a position where you are free, right, in an organization or institution, your job is to free somebody else, right? So your job essentially is to make space. So that's why we're here, right? That's really what it means to be human, right? We're here in order to make space, in order to provide others with opportunity, in order to pass on whatever we can, so that people can be able to realize their own full human potential. That's what this whole thing of life is about, right? That's why we're raising our children, right? That's why we're encouraging our nieces and nephews, whatever the case might be, because we want them to take up the space that is rightfully theirs. So I think that's what we should always be doing, wherever we are, whatever position we occupy. It could be in a school, or it could be in a company, or it could be in a factory. Right? Our job always is to try to make space and allow other people to flourish and encourage other people and provide them with whatever we can. And those are some concrete things that we can do.
Josh?
Well said, Adrian. I would just like them to stop trying in terms of like racism or discrimination. I find that a lot of these organizations, when they get called out, they try to still sweep it under the rug somehow. Like I'm thinking of Wendy Mesley with the N-word. It's like pulling teeth trying to get them to admit that, something was mishandled. So I think just tying into the whole conversation about us wanting apologies as the first step, I think it has to be an apology that actually addresses the wrongdoing. And then the second thing, the advice that I would give to my fellow Black colleagues is just kind of echoing what Adrian was saying. Like, think about the next generation. Also, think about all of the hardships that you had to go through, and think about how hard it was for you to get to where you are today. And just think about that next generation who's just finishing school right now. They're bright-eyed. They're still super excited. And the world you can do to make things a little bit easier for them, because then that's how we can actually have change happening over multiple generations.
Kayla?
For me, one of the big things that I'm focusing on in the conversations that I'm having is pipeline. I think it's incredibly important. I'm looking at networks and their give back programs, whether it be communities. I know we at TSN used to kind of give money out and as a tour to small communities to rebuild their fields, their basketball courts, what have you. But when you look at the winners list, it's all white small towns. And so for me, the conversations I'm having with people is look at your list. Look at who you've felt or who you've allowed to feel so empowered to ask for this free money, this contest money, and who you've alienated to not even feel encouraged or empowered to apply for these wonderful contests to help rebuild parts of their community. And I think to me, pipeline is everything. It's more than just, you look at certain schools, and when you look at the interns that come in, it's predominantly from it's only 2 schools that brings in interns, and especially in the sports space, it's all white kids mostly. And so it's changing what that pipeline looks like, but also going way further than that and adding real presence in communities, as Agent Court is where the other Bell Media Studios, or I guess they call it Bell Media Studio 2s. It's located in Scarborough. Why are we not in Scarborough? Why are we not in our Scarborough communities? Why are we just driving off the highway to go in the studio? Why are we not investing in the community that we call home?
Yes.
And so for me, that's a conversation I think a lot of people should be having. And what I would tell my fellow journalists who are going through it, kind of the same thing as Josh, is take a moment and just acknowledge all that you've come through, all that you've overcome, and understand that strength. Understand that is part of who we are, and softness is also strength. Let's be clear, but let's remind ourselves of just how much power we hold, because I think that when you get into this career, you almost feel stripped of yourself. You still feel stripped of your cape. You feel stripped of your superpower. You feel stripped of what you bring to the table. You feel stripped of how you dress, how you talk, just to make other people feel comfortable with you being in their space. Let's grab that all back by acknowledging the work that we've put in to get to this point.
Ika?
I want to say, okay, so I guess 2 things. The first part, what I would like for companies to do, like the media. You know what? When I was working at ET Canada, the people I saw with the most potential that I actually went to for help with my interview questions and stuff like that were the interns. Hire fresh people. They have the know-how now. Like, decades of experience is great, but sometimes it's less than decades. And these kids, they know what they're doing. They know what's going on. They know what they don't like. They know what the future is. So hire both. Have a balance, and that's what I saw that was wrong. Is it's like, okay, like, where are the fresh, innovative people? Like, where are the people who are going to bring a new dynamic? We're going to bring new ideas and not scared of speaking up. Hire them. Like, they're more than capable. And another thing I'll touch on that I'll say, and this is from experience, if nobody wants to hire you, if you are in school right now and you are out and nobody wants to hire you, create your own platform. I promise I make thousands of dollars every month on YouTube and on Instagram. And I produce my own content, I edit, I market it, I do everything myself on my YouTube channel, and it makes me thousands of dollars every month. It made me more than ET Canada, which is why I was able to work there. So if nobody will hire you, I promise, go online. You'll make more money anyway. If you're that passionate about what you want to do, you could do it, and you don't need to answer to anybody. Well, I guess except for YouTube, but you can, or Twitch, or whatever is new. There's so many new ways of showing your talent and being talented. It doesn't always equate to being on television. I am simply on YouTube. I'm a little social media person, but guess what? When it came time for me to speak up, I had the backing. Those people, they're young and they have time, and they will sit in your comments until you do what's right. And I had that because I have a platform where it's relatable. If I could walk away from ET Canada and not grow that career and know that I could confidently take care of my kids and my family and pay my bills because I created my own platform. So don't ever underestimate that. If nobody's going to hire you, invest in yourself and build and reach out to other people who are on platforms that you're interested in. Reach out to me, like I'll help you. Like reach out to anybody, and don't ever feel like television is the only way. There's so many different avenues, and explore that, and that's what I have to say.
Amazing. Kathleen?
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo things that everyone else has said because it was all brilliant. But I would also say for the executives in these positions, people in senior positions right now, I want to see them. I think there needs to be transparency. That's a big thing. This conversation is new to a lot of people. I've heard so much in response to this, like, I didn't know. Or thank you so much for doing the work to educate us. Well, now you know, and now we need that transparency. I want the numbers. I want the stats. Kayla did a post about this, that the last stat that we have about the ethnic makeup of our newsrooms is from 2006. That's too late. No, we need stats now. We need transparency. I want to see the executives. I want to see your senior team. And I want timelines. I want you to tell me when you're going to fix this, when you're going to bring seniors in, when you're going to bring executives in. Give me a date and let's hold them accountable to those dates. I also want this people who are benefiting, who have benefited from this system, who are not executives, but are senior producers, who are maybe not supervising producers, but are right below them. I want them to use the privilege that they have had to advance, to get the promotions that we didn't get, to start speaking up as well, to start stepping aside for certain opportunities if they need to. And then as far as for the next generation, I could touch on it. I think that for so long, someone asked me this in an interview, and it was like, what are your dreams without limitations? And I got a little emotional because we haven't had the privilege to dream without limitations. We haven't had that luxury. I really had to think about it. And so I would just say to the next generation, dream without limitations. Think about the big picture. If you want to start a network in whatever platform that is, on YouTube or whatever the next thing is going to be, do that and organize, as Adrian said. I mean, I'm thinking that now. Like, I've got enough talented friends. Like, we are going to start dreaming without limitations right now. And so that's the advice I think I would give. And also look to your elders. They're there even if they've had to leave the industry. Or if we're still in it and we're still fighting that fight, look to us and lean on us. Because, we want to, as Toni Morrison, who passed a year ago yesterday, said, we want to free you as well.
Yeah, so much amazing advice. Adrian, yes.
Can I add something? I think that we also need to build our own institutions. We need to build organizations. This week is the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists Conference, is happening virtually this year. And it's a fantastic organization. It's been going on now for over 40 years. We can build something like that here in Canada, and it's being built. The CABJ is something that you need to be joining and contributing to, and they have incredible leadership. They're led by some really, really good people, and so that's an institution that we should be investing in. Another thing, I'm not a litigious person, but we have to also study history. The fact is that in the 1970s, when women at the New York Times felt that they were being discriminated against and were not getting the positions of power that they felt that they deserved, they sued. They sued the New York Times, and they ended up getting a settlement of over $300,000. And what ended up happening was there was an affirmative action program put in place in order to ensure that those women would get those jobs. Right. So I'm saying that there are a lot of different kinds of strategies that we can use. One other quick thing I want to say. we have to hold everybody and every institution accountable. And that includes the unions that are supposed to be fighting for us, right? And so when I say that, I mean, even, for example, my union, the CMG, which has not always been on the side of Black folks that they're supposed to be fighting for, right?
Yeah.
And I know that because I have those conversations with people who feel that they haven't been represented, right? So we need to hold these organizations that are supposed to be supporting us to account as well, right? And we need to be unapologetic in calling them out, because at the end of the day, they're ours too. You know, I'm not relinquishing that territory, right? I own that territory too. We all own that territory, so we need to take our space.
Yeah.
Yes.
And HR as well. HR is supposed to be for us, and we know that they aren't most of the time. Yeah.
So Cole's notes, people, take up space, be unapologetic, and sue they ass if you have to. Those are your takeaways. Adrian, Josh, Ika, Kayla, Kathleen, it's my honor and privilege to be with you guys tonight. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's do it again.
Yes.
So honored to be in all of the presence.
I know. Oh my God. I want to say, like, I know Kayla, all of you guys, Josh, everybody, just thank you guys so much for supporting me and for stepping out and for speaking up. I know when you have a job, it's not easy to do that. And I want to say thank you so much for doing that. And I saw it. You guys were literally like retweeting and like commenting. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to get in trouble, but you guys still did it. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's good trouble. We all trying to get into it.
We show up for each other.
We got you.
That's right. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.